Hi, this is Raymond from Spain, and this is the Jeff Rubin Show. This is the enhanced version, which means that when you hear this noise, there should be a picture on the device you're using to listen to this podcast. This picture should help you understand better what Jeff and company are talking about. Cheers!
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jeff Rubin Show. Today's guest is Keith Gow. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Hi, great to be here.
Keith is one of the architects of the Tommy Westphall universe, a map that charts the crossover between what seems like every TV show ever, tying them into one universe. Am I describing this correctly, Keith?
Yeah, that's about right.
So let me give you, for instance, to better articulate what we're talking about. There was a show called I Love Lucy, and there was a spin-off of I Love Lucy called Here's Lucy. And on Here's Lucy, Lucy is held hostage with Detective Mannix. This is one episode. Lucy is held hostage with Detective Mannix for Mannix, which is a detective show that I only know through Simpsons references. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Detective Mannix also appeared on an episode of Diagnosis Murder to solve a cold case with the help of Dr. Mark Sloan. Still with me? And Diagnosis Murder once referenced the fictional Oceanic Airlines, which is, of course, from the show Lost. Thus, according to your map, one could infer that I Love Lucy and Lost take place in the same universe. So, you have done some research. Is this just you? Is this a team?
It's me and a friend of mine, and we started off on Usenet years ago. On the homicide group, and that's where it started, really. And there was a lot of people researching it then, and then it came back to the two of us who put the map together, and then we get emails regularly from people going, have you seen this one? Have you seen this crossover?
Over all of your research, how many shows have you gotten onto this map?
On the map, I think there's about 280. And if we updated it more often, there'd be closer to 350.
So it's this chart that shows how all of these shows take place in the same universe, and how you can connect them kind of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon style. It's almost like Facebook for TV shows. You can see how they met each other and how they know how they hang out.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible, really.
And can you explain why this is called the Tommy Westphall universe?
Okay. Tommy Westphall was a minor character in a TV show called St. Elsewhere back in the 1980s. The final episode reveals that the entire series has taken place in this young child's mind.
Now, I've never seen St. Elsewhere. All I know about it is really the ending, which I probably know because of your chart. Is that as out of left field when you're watching the show as it seems like when you're talking to me?
I think, well, I don't remember it happening at the time, but I think people were quite upset with it. Although I do believe there were offbeat elements to the show. I've only really seen the first season of it. I think that's the only season that's available on DVD. And I only know the end because of research on the internet.
And how did you decide that all of this took place inside Tommy's head? Why isn't it like a creation of Anya on Buffy? Or why doesn't it take place in the Degrassi-verse? How come Tommy is the nexus of this universe?
I think it's because when we started to look at the connections, St. Elsewhere crossed over with Homicide, and the creator of Homicide and one of the writers from St. Elsewhere, Tom Fontana, actually put these references in and talked about how, because he connected those shows to St. Elsewhere, that it existed in Tommy's mind. That wasn't something we invented. That was something that he talked about.
Oh, I see. So it was his suggestion that this was actually all going on in his universe, and then you just said, well, that's probably every TV show ever then.
Well, we didn't realize how big it was until we started looking. And then we realized that lots of writers like to reference other things that they've written, and it all comes together that way. And I think some networks like crossover to promote different shows as well.
So all the research was done over Usenet via internet communities?
It started out that way. Then we put up a community on LiveJournal so that we could discuss things with a wider range of people. And people emailed us after that with different suggestions, different shows that we hadn't seen or hadn't heard of, and references that they got that we didn't get.
How much research has gone into the chart we're seeing today that connects all of these shows into one universe?
I guess it did have a lot, and it's hard to say because it happened over years. But obviously, we only did it a bit at a time, and over time we weren't spending as much time on it because the chart is out of date because TV shows keep referencing each other and crossovers keep happening. It's almost to the point where we can't keep on top of it. But I like the fact that the universe continues to exist without us having to document it all.
When was the chart last updated?
The chart itself was updated a couple of years ago, I think. There's a list of TV shows that I've updated since then, which isn't part of the chart, but I've still got a list or emails suggesting other additions, so it keeps going and going.
I guess I didn't realize that it hadn't been updated in years, just because I still see it discussed all of the time. Do you have any sense of how many views the chart has gotten over the years?
It would be thousands, tens of thousands probably. And I like the fact that it keeps getting discovered. For a while, people don't talk about it, and then it gets discovered like it's brand new information, and people just talk about it again. And I mean, this interview's proof of that. I hadn't really spoken about it for a long time, and then now it's come up again.
What is it about shows crossing over with each other that interests you so much? Because I share a similar fascination with it.
I think I just like the randomness of it sometimes. Obviously, these shows, sometimes they don't begin as connected to each other. NBC likes to do a lot of crossover promotion with their sitcoms. I think CBS has done similar. And obviously, those characters don't always fit in the universes that they go into. For example, Detective Munch, who started out in Homicide and is on SVU now.
This is the Richard Belzer character, Detective Munch.
Yeah, Richard Belzer's character. He was an episode of The X-Files. And obviously, The X-Files and Homicide, they should not be in the same universe. But it's clearly the same character.
Munch, in particular, is almost like the Doctor Who of this TV world, where he's jumped between lots of different shows, including also Arrested Development and The Wire. Probably the best comedy and the best drama of the last decade.
That's right. I think he's been in 7 different TV shows as his character.
Why do you think that is?
I've never really understood it. I don't know what the appeal of Richard Belzer is outside of the character. The character was fascinating to me on Homicide, but I never really got into SVU, and I don't think he's quite the same character as he was 20 years ago, because I just realized it is 20 years since Homicide started, so he's been around a long time. I really don't know why people keep using him.
Homicide and St. Elsewhere are kind of the center of the chart. They form a cross in the center of the chart, and that they're really the keystone, the foundation for a lot of these crossovers, because the chart visualizes this very well. There's kind of a neighborhood of the chart that's related to X-Files, and you're not surprised to see that this show touches X-Files. Or there's a neighborhood of the chart that's, like you're saying, the NBC sitcoms. But Homicide and St. Elsewhere are the plus in the middle that allow you to jump between wildly different genres and get between things like Cheers and the X-Files in 1 or 2 steps.
Yeah.
What is it that made St. Elsewhere so crossover friendly?
It was a classic show of the 80s, and it's quite well remembered by people in the industry for being a bit revolutionary, for it taking the hospital drama but making it a bit oddball. So a lot of writers since then like to reference it. There are lots of crossovers between characters, but there's also just references. I mean, the connection to Degrassi Junior High is just...
Now you're talking my language. Have you listened to the show? Do you know how much we talk about Degrassi Junior High on the show?
No, I have no idea.
You just struck gold, my friend. What were you going to say about Degrassi?
There's the only connection between Degrassi and St. Elsewhere is the mention of one of the characters from St. Elsewhere. I think it's just a voiceover in a hospital scene back in the original series where they just called out for this doctor to come to emergency or whatever. And I just thought that was too random, but it was obviously a reference to St. Elsewhere.
Because Degrassi, the original series, TOS, that was in the 80s and it was on, I guess, about the same time as St. Elsewhere.
Yeah, I guess that's true, yeah.
And then once you connect Degrassi, the original series, to it, obviously hanging right off of Degrassi, the original series, is the other Degrassi shows, both the Kids of Degrassi Street and Next Gen.
Yeah.
Some of these connections, and you're acknowledging this a little bit as we talk, are a little more tenuous than others. Like sometimes, they're not all the Jetsons traveling back in time to meet the Flintstones. Some of them are more, like you're saying, like on Angel, the demonic law firm, Wolfram Ram and Hart, which is the main antagonist for the show, they represent an evil company that's also, which is in itself, what's the name of that company? Hold on. I have the chart in front of me.
It's Weyland-Yutani?
No, they also reference Weyland-Yutani, which is from Alien and now Prometheus, which would connect us to movies, which is a whole separate thing. Yo-Yo-Dine is the one I'm thinking of.
You're thinking of Yo-Yo-Dine, yeah. Yo-Yo-Dine is a company from a Thomas Pynchon novel, and the references, Yo-Yo-Dine is also used in a film called Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
And a lot of the TV references are to the Buckaroo Banzai film, not to the Thomas Pynchon novel, obviously. But because Yo-Yo-Dine is mentioned in several different shows as this conglomerate, we figure that they're probably all talking about the same thing.
And it is kind of all the shows making the same joke. Like on Angel, I think the joke there is that this demonic law firm has these demonic corporations as clients, and it's also referenced on the John Larroquette Show, which was an NBC sitcom, and there were also lawyers, and I suspect it was a similar context. I don't remember every episode of the John Larroquette Show, but I suspect it was a similar context that they mentioned it in. Is that a real crossover?
Yes, that's a tricky one to answer.
Obviously, it wasn't an explicit thing where the Angel writers and the John Larroquette writers got together and talked about how their shows share similar characteristics.
No, and they don't at all. And I think the John Larroquette Show is probably referencing the Thomas Pynchon novel more than the other shows are referencing that novel.
So what percentage of the connections on the chart are these very explicit ones where Munch appears on a different show, even in a satirical context, and how many are these looser connections, like Thomas Pynchon novel references?
I would say there's still probably 60 or 70% are character crossovers, and these other loose ones only form a much smaller percentage, about a quarter, I would think. But those tiny references link other groups of shows that are connected by character. So it was fun just expanding the universe a lot by finding these tiny references that just pulled in all these other shows that actually had character crossovers in them.
Did you ever think about doing another dimension of the chart and including movies? Because just in casual conversation here, we've already connected Alien to I Love Lucy and Homicide: Life on the Street to, what was the other movie we mentioned? Oh, Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah. Well, at one point we made up some rules and exclusions just to keep ourselves sane, and we decided to not mention movies, and we decided to keep out animated shows because that just brings in a whole other dimension of madness, really.
Weyland-Yutani is also referenced, I believe, and I think this is mentioned on the chart in the Firefly universe. I don't know why we keep talking about Joss Whedon, probably because he likes doing in-jokes to other things. But
that's right.
And because we're all obsessed with him this summer. But the Weyland-Yutani Corporation is mentioned in a lot of things, and it's kind of just it's more of a cultural touchstone that they're referencing more than the other shows.
Oh, of course, yeah, but because Tom Fontana, the writer from St. Elsewhere and Homicide, who put these things together, also had a fictional corporation that went from St. Elsewhere to his prison drama Oz on HBO, we figured that fictional corporations should be a genuine link because sometimes they are.
What are the other rules about what does not belong on the chart?
Well, animated series for one, we'd love to put in The Simpsons because obviously Fox Mulder from the X-Files appeared in The Simpsons has had a lot of appearances from other animated characters, but then once that happens, you've got to start bringing in a whole lot of stuff from the 70s and the 80s, which would have blown it out to hundreds of more shows, which we decided not to use. And then Munch, he's appeared on Sesame Street, so that sort of blows our mind. And yeah, movies as well. We just decided that we'd cut them out as well.
I always assumed that Sesame Street and Law and Order Trial by Jury took place in the same universe, but I never really had conclusive proof until now.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chart and I have it in front of me, and St. Elsewhere and Homicide are the nexus of the universe. They're in the middle here.
Yep.
But there's some other shows that are also bigger than others. It seems like these shows were maybe more crossover friendly. One very large corner of the map is the X-Files. Tons of shows connected to the X-Files.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about that show that led to it crossing over with so many others?
I think probably most of those are references. Obviously, there's the spin-off Millennium, but there's also tiny references. And I think, like St. Elsewhere, it was sort of a cultural touchstone of the 90s that people wanted to reference. I'm looking at the chart now and I'm thinking, I can't even remember how some of these connect. Because,
I've got the key open. Which ones are you wondering about?
I was wondering how Malcolm in the Middle connected to the X-Files.
I was wondering the same thing. Hold on. I'm going to go to section 4. I searched for Malcolm, and I got Malcolm Reynolds. Hold on. We're going to get to the bottom of this. This is my favorite thing in the world. This PDF that I have open right now is so organized, and I love the level of detail that you've brought to it. And I want to talk more about how you organize, but right now let's focus on this Malcolm in the Middle problem. The X-Files spun off the Lone Gunman. We saw that. Morley Cigarettes, which is the cigarette-smoking man's brand of cigarettes, referenced on Huff, referenced on CSI, so that's how they connect over there. Spike from Buffy smokes Morley cigarettes. So it seems like the Morley cigarettes are a lot of them. And here it is. On Malcolm in the Middle, Lois had a pack of Morleys stashed in with her other items that she was hiding from her family.
Right. Yeah, of course.
That's kind of like how Quentin Tarantino ties all his movies together. He has, I think it's Red Apple cigarettes, right?
Yeah, that's right. Apple cigarettes, yeah.
And I think there's a few other fake brands that unite all the Quentin Tarantino movies.
Yeah, that's true. And again, I think it's just they're fictional. They fictionalize these products so that, real corporations don't sue people. But I still think it's fun to tie the references together.
Why? What do you think Quentin Tarantino gets out of connecting all his movies like that?
I don't know. I think he likes the idea that he's God and he's creating that universe, which is I think true of Tom Fontana as well. I think he loves the fact that people keep referencing St. Elsewhere even now, and people keep talking about Tommy Westphall like he was an important character, which he really wasn't.
In your mind, what makes something a good crossover versus a failure as a crossover?
I think if the characters are believable in both TV shows, I really like the Practice Ally McBeal crossover because although the two different shows had completely different tones, the Practice started out as a pretty gritty lawyer show and Ally McBeal was a comedy. When those characters appeared in the different shows, they reacted to the different tones. So the character, the lead from The Practice, when he was in the Ally McBeal universe, what the hell is with these people? What are they on? And then obviously when Ally McBeal crossed over to The Practice and had to deal with, real dead bodies and that kind of thing, because I think Ally McBeal didn't really deal with murders and stuff. On her show, she got freaked out. So I quite like that because there was some internal consistency, but I guess that's because David E. Kelly wrote both shows.
So the blue center of the universe, like we're saying, is Homicide and St. Elsewhere.
Yeah.
And everything else is black and white, except those two are blue. And then there's one show that's in yellow, the Bill Dana Show.
Right.
What is the Bill Dana Show?
Well, that's a really old show starring Bill Dana, which is connected to quite a few old series. The only reason it's in yellow is because we couldn't figure out how to connect on that chart the Bill Dana Show because he connects to Batman and to another show.
Make Room for Daddy.
Make Room for Daddy.
And we're talking 60s Batman.
That's right, 60s Batman. And just physically on the chart, I couldn't make it work. I couldn't get them to connect to each other.
But it's incredible that that's the only one you had difficulty connecting, because there's 280 shows on this chart, and they're laid out in there's a method to this madness. And the Bill Dana show was the one that wouldn't fit.
Yeah, that's the one that broke me, I think. And possibly the point at which I went, no more, can't do this. Just because it would have required a third dimension or something. But yeah, there is some method to this madness, which is fascinating as well. But I think mostly that ties to different networks trying to connect their shows for whatever reason.
Like what?
I think CBS and NBC at different times did theme nights that connected all their sitcoms.
There's a pretty famous story where there was an NBC must-see TV night, and they did a blackout theme, and every show featured a blackout. And Mad About You had a blackout, and Friends had a blackout, and this was when Seinfeld was very popular, and I guess NBC told Jerry Seinfeld about that, and he was like, I don't think we're going to have a blackout on our show this week.
That's right, yeah.
Just shot him down. Mad About You is an interesting one, because that show, you wouldn't expect, has that weird crossover with Friends, where Ursula's sister is the waitress from Mad About You. Or wait, Ursula is the waitress from Mad About You. She's Phoebe's sister from Friends.
Yeah, and which, of course, obviously wasn't designed that way either, but obviously the writers of Friends liked the character of Ursula, and so they made them they made them sisters. Whereas some of the other crossovers were just stunts or events or what have you. But yeah, I mean, Ursula stayed in Friends for a long, long time.
How did you organize this? Do you have any? I mean, looking at this chart, what is your profession? I wouldn't be surprised if you told me you do programming. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me you're an artist. I wouldn't be surprised if you're just crazy.
I may just be crazy. I do work in IT for a living, but I'm a playwright by training.
So that's interesting, because it's both of those things that I said. You have your feet in both worlds.
Yeah. I've never thought about how that connected to the Tommy universe before.
Well, I just think that, me personally, maybe if I got the ball rolling and I was talking to people online, like, I'm very into this research and I love crossovers and figuring out how these things work together, and maybe I could have done that research, but charting it, just even if you gave me the research, I don't think I could chart it. Charting it is an accomplishment in and of itself, and I was wondering what your method for laying it out was.
Well, it evolved as we found the different connections. I think the original chart, obviously, it still started with Homicide and St. Elsewhere, and possibly in that cross formation, even way back when we only had 30 or 40 series. But it was the only one that made sense to try and connect things that were directly connected and things that obviously weren't. And it was just the easiest way to lay it all out. And because we had those 4 different quadrants, that helped a lot to keep it under control. And somehow there wasn't a lot of exceptions like the Bill Dana show, and all those quadrants stayed where they were.
Yeah, I'm looking at shows that cross over with 2 other shows, like the Bill Dana show, and you have something like Green Acres that crosses over with both Petticoat Junction and Beverly Hillbillies and Hogan Heroes, but those can all hang out in the same corner of the map because Petticoat Junction and Beverly Hillbillies also had direct crossover.
Yeah, that's right. It's sort of amazing to me that it has worked out so smoothly.
Yeah, it's I think what makes it so fun is that you have pockets like that, and you're like, okay, I understand. I think those were all CBS series from the 70s, right? So you can kind of see that pocket there. But it's fun to see how many jumps it takes to get to something that's completely different from another universe, like Mission Impossible or Alf.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of crazy.
Obviously, you're a fan of, I guess, continuity. Which of these, if any, are your favorite crossovers?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I guess, different universes, different... obviously, the Buffy Angel universe, also David E. Kelly's shows, for a long time, they didn't connect to each other, but then he did start bringing characters over. Obviously, the Boston Legal and Boston Public and The Practice and all those shows were explicitly connected, but some of his other shows took a while to sort of come together.
But is there a crossover in your mind? An episode where some character shows up with another character that you wouldn't expect that really stands out in your mind is kind of the ultimate crossover.
Well, I think I just have to come back to Munch being on the X-Files, because at the time it didn't make any sense, and it still doesn't. Just because of it, those two shows are basically the most different kinds of shows you can have on TV, science fiction and cop drama, and the fact that they do explicitly exist in the same universe is bizarre to me.
Arrested Development using Munch, it seems very likely that the people behind Arrested Development knew what they were doing, and they were bringing their show into this world almost explicitly, because that show's so self-referential to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know TV writers do that and do want to bring in more more and more shows into the universe. I've actually had a couple of emails from different writers over time saying, did you notice this reference that I put in from this one show that I wrote on to this other show that I'm now writing on?
Writers from what kind of shows send you those emails?
A writer from Buffy moved on to Dexter and made a reference in Dexter to, I believe, the Double Meat Palace, which was the...
Oh, I remember. That's where the fast food restaurant, where, of course, they were poisoning people because they were demons or something like that.
Yeah, so I believe that's what that was an odd reference. But again, he did it partially as a joke and partially to put it all together in the same universe.
I almost feel like it shouldn't count if they do it intentionally. Do you think that's true?
No, because Tom Fontana started out by doing it intentionally. He knew what he was doing when he connected St. Elsewhere to Homicide. He knew that was pulling it all into the same universe. And he likes the fact that that different TV shows continue to connect to St. Elsewhere and make everything appear in Tommy's mind.
One of my favorite crossovers, which I only learned about recently, is the Power Rangers crossing over with the Ninja Turtles. Are you familiar with this one?
No, I'm not really.
So that happened. The live-action Ninja Turtles, when there was a fifth turtle, Venus, and she had boobs, even though she was a turtle, and turtles aren't mammals, that version of the series crossed over with Power Rangers Space. And there's this terrific gif online of the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers shaking hands. Like Leonardo and the Red Ranger are shaking hands in the middle, and everyone's kind of celebrating around them. But what's weird about that, and what I'd love your take on, is in this crossover, the Ninja Turtles see the Power Rangers, and they know them from the Power Rangers TV series. So in this universe, not only are the Power Rangers real, but they also have the same show on TV.
Yeah, that happened with The Practice and Ally McBeal. They were explicitly in the same universe because the characters crossed over several times, but characters on Ally McBeal talked about watching The Practice, so that's bizarre.
The other paradox, the other TV continuity paradox that comes to mind is Uncle Jesse. Are you familiar with this one?
No, I don't think so.
There's this Uncle Jesse-shaped rip in the TV space-time continuity.
Yes, actually, I read about that recently, yeah.
I believe the problem is that there is an episode of Full House where Urkel stops by to convince Stephanie that glasses are cool. With you so far. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then also, there's an episode of Step by Step where Urkel is on Step by Step. I don't remember why he's there, but Urkel stops by both shows, thus connecting Full House, Family Matters, and Step by Step into the same universe. But then there's an episode of Step by Step where John Stamos comes by, and Suzanne Summers, she's all flustered because it's John Stamos, and she knows him from Full House. So the reality of it collapses in on itself.
Yeah, that's a bit of fun. I think that happens quite a lot, actually, with people talking about TV shows that really exist, and then it becomes talking about different fictional levels of fictional reality and that sort of thing.
I don't expect them to have an episode where there's like a tear in space-time and the family from Step by Step has to like fight off vampires from Buffy or anything, but it'd be nice if they took better care of these things.
Absolutely, it would be nice, but it's fun when they talk about those things, and then people talk to me about the fact that Jay Leno appeared in an episode of Homicide, and does that bring in the real universe? And it's like, oh, no, that's gone too far.
Jay Leno and Kurt Loder does this a lot. They have a lot of appearances in movies and TV shows. I just saw one the other day. I saw the movie Underdog, which is the adaptation of the cartoon Underdog. Do you even remember there's a movie Underdog?
No, I didn't remember that.
There was. It's like a live action thing, and there's like a dog that's mostly CG who's the superhero. And, they have this scene of Jay Leno where he's like, Underdog, he's flying around the neighborhood, like, and he tells a little Jay Leno joke about Underdog. I think if you just did the Jay Leno-verse, you could connect a lot of TV shows and movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if you take the celebrities in the Tonight Show, they're promoting their movies that they're in. Once again, you have a rip in the community, in the continuity.
Yeah. And yes, the universe collapses in on itself.
Tom Fontana, who we keep bringing up, he has acknowledged this in the past, correct?
He has, yeah. I think his mentioning of it was what prompted us in the homicide community to start figuring out how far it all went. And so I think that's where it started. He actually mentioned what he was doing. And we thought, well, let's see how far it goes. And we connected 30 or 40 series pretty quickly just by character crossovers. And then when we realized there was references to different companies that were explicitly put in for the same reason, it just expanded exponentially for years and years. People would find different references and different connections.
You say the homicide community, and I'm assuming you're going back to Usenet again.
Yeah, Usenet. Yeah.
Usenet, for those that don't know, is like this ancient, dark corner of the internet that predates the web, and it was basically a bulletin board system. It's kind of been made obsolete in recent years by, the bulletin board systems on websites, web boards, I guess, or whatever you call them.
Yeah.
What was it like being on being in a part of a community that was following a great show that was way ahead of its time? In this early age of the internet, what was that community like?
The homicide community was amazing, just because of the different kinds of people that it attracted, and the absolutely amazing insight into real life police work and that sort of thing from lawyers and people that read this community. It was an odd mix of different kinds of people. Obviously, some TV communities are just filled with pop culture nerds like myself, but then you get all these other people that are fascinated by how realistic homicide was, and so you get cops and lawyers and people talking about how close it was to reality. So it was a great mix of different people, and Usenet was really the place to discuss TV shows as they happened during the 90s.
In your estimation, are the current places where you can go and talk about TV shows less good, less communicative, I don't know what the word is, than the Usenet ones were?
This is going to make me sound like an old man, but I believe that, Usenet focused people to one area. So everyone who talked about homicide in the 90s really talked about it there. There wasn't blogs to talk about it on. There wasn't live journal to talk about it on. If you wanted to talk about homicide, that's where you went. There was obviously, different communities for, things like Twin Peaks and all sorts of different specific shows. And Usenet was set up in a way where you couldn't just create a new group if you wanted to. You had to, petition or something, the Usenet
governing body.
Yeah, some kind of hierarchy.
The Council of Nerds.
Yes, who decreed you may talk about homicide in this space over here. It brought everyone who wanted to talk about homicide together, and even Buffy I talked about on Usenet in the early 2000s. But then social networking, appeared in different forms, and people spread out, and different groups formed in different parts of the internet. So it's not as focused anymore. Everyone's got their own little corners of the internet that they play in with their friends.
But don't you think there's also more people discussing shows like Homicide and shows like Buffy than there were in the time that those shows were new.
Oh, of course, absolutely. If if Usenet was the only place to talk about, a current TV show like Mad Men, for instance, there would probably be too many people there talking about it. But back in the late '90s, early 2000s, there was a lot less people online, so it was sort of like we got rid of most of it. It was focused on just the people who were online, and now everyone's online. You'd have too many posts, you'd have too many discussions going on. So I guess it was it was what it was because of how many people had access to it.
Do you have any idea? I mean, I'm sure you don't know exactly, but how many people were participating? New episode of Homicide airs. How many people are talking about it that night, the next day?
I guess there was a regular community of like names that would pop up all the time of probably only 30 people maybe who were on there for years at a time. But after a new episode happened, a lot more people would come on to discuss it, and then they'd go away till the next week, whereas some would stick around. And then some of us kept talking about Homicide years after it finished as well.
Are there any of your alt.tv.homicide friends that you still keep in touch with?
Well, Ash, who helped me put this chart together and who did most of the work on the key. I focused on putting the chart together, and she did most of the key. So I still keep in contact with her, and a couple of others who I'm friends with on Facebook, but don't really interact with as much as I do with Ash.
Also, I don't want to blow up your spot or anything, but you are not from America.
I'm not from America, no.
We are currently talking through the magic of Skype phone. You are
from Australia.
You are in Australia right now.
Right now.
And yet we're talking about American TV shows, decades worth of American TV shows, both ones that are currently on and ones that were on in the 60s, as if we're neighbors. We have this great cultural thing in common. Do you watch... I mean, what is the TV scene like there that you know all these American TV shows? Is that unusual?
No, it's not. American TV pretty much dominates our TV landscape as well. We obviously have our own TV shows, but because America produces so much more, it's easier to find new, different shows coming out of America than it is here, because we've got such a small population, and obviously, and less networks to fill and less hours to fill because of that. And also, it's just harder to get TV shows made here. Just the money isn't around the same as it is in Hollywood.
I'll tell you what, though, I sure enjoyed that Summer Heights High.
Oh, did you? Oh, that's great. Yeah, I really love that show.
That was very popular here. I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to think of a reference that's not. This is a knife. So, Summer Heights High was made a lot of inroads here. Was that popular there too? Summer Heights High is this great show with Chris Lilly where he plays all different characters, and I guess the follow-up to that, Angry Boys, was also very good. And here they aired on HBO, and I think they found a following. What was it like? Is that because that's the one Australian show I know? I'm almost assuming that it's huge in Australia. Is that the case?
It was huge in Australia. Yeah, We Could Be and Summer Heights High was preceded by another show called We Could Be Heroes.
Right.
And I think it aired in the States under another title, but I can't think of what that was. And both of those were huge. I think Angry Boys lost a lot of the audience that he had built up with those other two shows, because it wasn't quite as new and different, and a lot of those characters appeared in the previous two shows. Obviously, Shimei was in Summer Heights High before Angry Boys. Oh no, sorry, she wasn't in Angry Boys, was she? She was in
We Can Be Heroes and the other one, and Summer Heights High.
But one of the characters, the two brothers that were in Angry Boys, the twin brothers, were in We Could Be Heroes first.
So there's a tight little continuity over there too.
There is, yeah. Well, I mean, Chris literally writes, directs, scores, produces the show for himself.
Is that? Are you aware that he's finding success internationally when that happens?
I did know when Summer Heights High was airing over there, and I knew that Angry Boys was co-produced by HBO. But Angry Boys aired here months before it aired in America, so we'd seen it and we'd had our reaction to it, and then when it aired in America, I barely even noticed it.
Do you watch a lot of Australian TV shows in addition to these American TV shows? Do you have to watch twice as much TV as I do?
No, I don't actually. Australian television is a lot more conservative as far as it doesn't try new things. We have our cop shows and our hospital dramas, but they're not. They're just, like you would. They're not as exciting as, American cop shows and hospital dramas, although not that I watch those particularly either.
There must be one great Australian show, though, that I'm completely unfamiliar with. Like, is there a Lost of Australia that I could get into? Tell me I have something to live for now that Lost is over.
I feel terrible. I feel like I'm betraying my country. There was a show here called Frontline, which I believe may have made it to America at some stage and aired, at midnight or something under a different title again, which was a setup of news shows.
I've seen a lot of clips from that online. I've seen a lot of segments, and it's very, very funny. Very, very clever.
Yeah, that was very clever, and it actually, at the time, had a big impact on people and how they reacted to those kind of current affairs news shows in Australia. And some of those shows here had to, sort of wake up to themselves and not treat the viewers like idiots.
So these are comedies. Is there any drama from Australia we should at all consider?
There's a TV show called Rush, which was on for a few years and ended just last year, which was a cop show. And I found that was the first cop show maybe since Homicide. Oh, no, The Wire. But I can't really compare it to The Wire because I can't compare anything to The Wire, really. Where they focused on the characters more than they focused on the drama of police work. And it was a show that really allowed there to be quiet moments in the middle of the fact that they were part of a unit called the Tactical Response Unit. So the things that they dealt with were big things. There were, bank robberies and, terrorism and that kind of thing. But when they were off the job, they were allowed to have these great character moments.
Wait a minute. You guys have police in Australia?
We do have police in Australia, yes.
I thought the whole thing was patrolled by Paul Hogan.
I don't know where. I don't think Paul Hogan even lives in Australia anymore.
As an old school, last question I have for you. As an old school Homicide fan, do you think The Wire is better than Homicide?
I think it was more consistently good over its 5 years than Homicide, which started out as this amazing show, and the network kept picking at it and trying to cast better looking people and trying to get them to do more lurid kind of stories. And I think the Homicide community essentially likes to pretend that season 7 at least doesn't exist at all, and season 6 was pretty much the end of the TV show that we loved.
How many years was Homicide on?
7.
That's a very long time for a show that, was never a hit, I feel like.
Yeah, well, I think that's the difference. Back in the 90s, there wasn't as much competition from basic cable and premium cable networks. They weren't making shows. HBO wasn't making shows until Oz and then The Sopranos, and then that was by the time Homicide had ended. So it was a show that basically existed on NBC on a Friday night and was allowed to stay there because it didn't have that much competition.
Is there anything we can do to loop podcasts, cross them over with a current show, and make this conversation a part of the Tommy Westphall universe?
No, I don't think that's possible unless you've got Jay Leno on the line as well.
We can try. Keith, thank you so much for talking about it. Where can people check out the Tommy Westphall universe?
I've actually just set up a new URL for it. So it's tommywestphall.keithgow.com, which will direct you to the old site, which has got a long, convoluted URL that I forget now.
TommyWestphall.KeithGow.com. Keith, thank you so much for creating this incredible chart and talking to us about it today.
No worries. It was a lot of fun talking about it.
That will do it for this week's episode. Next week, Jeff Rubin Show number 50, our 1 year-ish anniversary show. That episode is going to have Pat Castles, it's going to have Sarah Schneider, it's going to have Josh Rubin, it's going to have Dan Meth, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and it will be up Tuesday. I will remind you when it's up if you follow me on Twitter at Jeff Rubin Show, on Tumblr at jeffrubin.com, my Facebook fan page, and of course, youtube.com/Jeff Rubin. Thank you so much for listening. Episode 50 next week. Be there.